And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today we are going to talk about the new featured format. But before we get to that, I hope everyone had good holidays, a good winter break, happy new year, and I hope we're all set to attack 2023 like a main character stacked with wounds, with no cards in hand and no locations in the row. Like, we've had a couple of rough ones. I'm coming to 2023 with an overabundance of positive energy. So let's dive right into the first featured format of the year. All right. I think this probably comes as no surprise, but featured format 18 is called Previously On, and this is, well, I'll just read it directly from the post on Discord. Tune in for a new episode of the Photographic Universe starring some of your favorite aliens, androids, and wizards, and super soldiers. Season Winter of 2023 starts January 1st, runs through March 31st. You must build a photographic deck, a photographic universe deck with a main character from WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or Loki issues. All other photographic deck building rules apply. Legal card pool, only photographic universe cards. So even if you have Jen in your deck, you're not going to be able to wish for some of the juicy illustrated cards that are out there that could be playable or hypothetically useful. Within this format, it's photographic only. This tends to be the winter format. And I I have two thoughts. Like, I'm divided. I'm conflicted on how I feel overall. First off, we need a photographic format. I think having a featured format that puts the focus on the smaller of the two universes and kind of closes the door on the vast majority of the card pool, I think that's important. I think it's good. And honestly, while I may have disagreed with this in previous years, at this point, I think this is actually going to be an interesting, fun format. I'm really looking forward to seeing how all of the cards from 2022 interact with the wider photographic card pool. Now, I have to acknowledge that this is the smaller of the two card pools, and in years past, many, myself included, have made the criticism that the photographic only card pool, these formats are kind of limited. They tend to be pretty linear. The best cards at each drop are pretty obvious, and it leads to a lot of samey games, both in testing and at the event table. And that probably is not going to be different for this one, although I would argue it's probably for different reasons. So overall, the photographic universe has some just truly out of control, bonkers main characters. And we're not going to have to deal with stuff like the mayor. We're not going to have to deal with stuff like Outriders, which is good. But the way that they finagled that, the way they threaded the Outrider sucks needle here, is they limited us to only the main characters from WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Loki, which is not a very large number. And when you also factor in the fact that it within WandaVision, some of those main characters are kind of joined. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here, but they're not even all standalone main characters. So we kind of have fewer total playable options, and because of that, I think we're going to see a lot of people, at least within the sort of early days of this format, are going to gravitate towards the obvious powerhouses. Now, when I was doing my review for Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki, and I sat here and went through every single card, I noticed a trend that a lot of the Falcon Winter Soldier main characters have level up conditions that your opponent can interact with and do some pretty unpleasant things to. So right out of the gate, I'm already looking at those as not unviable, but as asking more from me as a player and potentially putting me at higher risk. Now, if I'm playing at my kitchen table in this format, sure, I'll play anything, like, let's have fun. But if we're looking at this from a competitive standpoint, which, let's be fair, the featured formats are primarily for the more competitive players within the game. At the kitchen table, you don't need a format other than just sort of force novelty, which, again, is totally valid and I think is good. But generally, when we talk about formats, I come at these from a very competitive, focused mindset. And I think that's appropriate given the role that these featured formats serve within our community. So if we're looking at this from a competitive mindset, I definitely think that the Falcon Winter Soldier is going to have some weaker entries in the main character space, that Loki and Sylphie just seem completely insane to me. Now, it's still early days. I haven't had these cards for very long, so I'm not sitting here saying anything's OP or anything. I'm not making any of those kinds of claims. But we all sit down at the format, we look at the list of main characters that are available, and there's a few that rise to the top that I think are pretty obvious, and it's non-controversial to say, hey, these are main characters that you either going to play as or you need to have a plan for how you play against. And for me, that short list is Loki and Sylphie. I think those are the two that are really stand out. Not saying they're the only playables. They're definitely not the only playable main characters in this format, especially when you consider that this is, while the main characters are limited to just the Disney Plus arc, and again, I think this is more about, well, I think there's two things being served by this. One, it incentivizes people to get the new sets, as if we didn't already need incentive to get the tiny drops of hydration that were given to us during a very parched 2022. Everybody wants these sets already. But, Upper Deck is a business. They need to sell cards. It makes sense that whatever the featured format is would push players to want to buy whatever the newest product is. And I think the other role that's being served here is allowing them to sort of soft ban, or because it's not a ban, they're just not allowed in the things like Valkyrie, Mayor, of course, Outriders. There's some really gnarly stuff in Photographic Universe. First Evil is another one, although depending upon her mileage may vary based on the format. I guess that's true of every main character. So overall, I am happy to see a Photographic Universe format coming in winter. Well, is happy the right word? So I wish it wasn't always in winter, I guess is kind of where I land. I like the idea that there is a focused format on the smaller of the two card pools, generally once a year. Um, and that's good. I think that certainly is a positive for the community. And I think Photographic at this moment in time is really poised to give us a cool format. There's a lot of really wild cards that came out. Considering that I have so many positive things to say about 2022, and it was the sparsest year for versus cards ever. Like we got the fewest total number of cards, and I still look back at the year as having some exciting stuff in it. Is wild. I think it's a testament to how cool the Disney Plus arc is. So again, I'm really happy to have a format that leans into and makes players play with these new toys and solve these new puzzles. That's awesome. At the same time, I cannot pretend that photographic only formats in the past haven't been plagued with some problems. Now, are we at the point where that's going to no longer be the case, where we have that critical mass of cards, where photographic becomes its own crazy thing? Maybe, but based on the limitation on the main characters that we're given here, I don't think we're really going to see that one way or the other. Now, I do want to mention Midwinter here briefly as well. That's coming up this weekend, and that will not be in the featured format. That's going to be in the Incursion format, or modern ban list, with the modern ban list layered on top of it, which we did get an update for. So thank you to the Modern Council for getting right on that once the community made its voice heard. Overall, it is a little troublesome that we got a Discord announcement on December 28th of these featured formats, and it didn't even merit like a blog post. I probably since then we've got a blog post, but what brought it to my attention that there was even a new featured format at all was somebody saying on January 3rd, hey, maybe you should make a blog post about the new featured format, at which point I went and looked for it. So that's not great. I mean, yes, over the holidays, I tend to be a little bit less plugged in to my hobby stuff. It's a time for family and kind of focusing on other things. So some of that is certainly that my attention drifted away from the hobby space a little bit. But at the same time, come on, man, players should not have to be a member of the Discord and check the announcements in the Discord to figure out something as big and important as the featured format. It's also a little troubling to me that we only got one format here. Now, the precedent historically has been that we get two formats at a time. So we get essentially half the year's worth of formats, and then in around Gen Con time, after Gen Con, we get the back end of the year's formats. So it, I mean, I get that we're in unprecedented times. We're kind of in uncharted waters with regard to this game and the gaming industry as a whole. Like things still have not really settled down since COVID. We're kind of in this strange middle ground where we're sort of getting back to normal, but there's still big things that have not found their way back to normal. So all of that added together, I think this is positive news. Like the negative version of this would be we don't even get a format announcement and we just don't hear anything. And that's not what happened. So while I do have a little things that only getting 3 sets last year, well, 4 if you count crossover, is also a little troubling. You know, these are not the kind of things that we want to see, but I don't think that we can chalk that up to a comment about game health. I think this is a comment about the overall industry and the things that are going on that are far beyond anybody's control and certainly aren't the fault of Upper Deck or Super Awesome Games. The world is in a tumultuous place at the moment. So I do feel very positive, but I would be remiss if I didn't kind of point out a few of these little, like I worry, I want the game to succeed. So little changes like only giving us one format instead of two, it bears mentioning. Overall, though, I'm excited to play with these new Disney Plus main characters, particularly the entire Loki box. I'm really excited about. So I can't say enough positive things. But I've never been accused of being too positive. So, all right, here at the end of the show, I want to give a shout out to all of the patrons at the ProMat Eclipse level and above. We got Roland, Peter, Patrick, Justin, Jason, and Brad. Your support helps make sure we can keep the lights on around here. And if you like what we're doing, patreon.com/thebuildphase. I'm Mr. Ben. Until next time, go win some games.